All right, hello guys. How are you guys doing today? It's a nice warm day outside today. I'm gonna wait just a couple more seconds for more to happen. More people to hop on. All right. Hey, Yasmin. Awesome. Hello. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I know it's not our usual Instagram live at Tuesdays at 12 p.m. But because it is July, it is Minority Mental Health Month, we wanted to do something a little bit different and highlight the voices of the minorities in our community. This week we have a lot going on. Check our Instagram page for the other ones scheduled. And then before I begin, I just want to mention that we are starting to wrap up our QPR classes. So if you're a group or an organization in the San Fernando Valley interested in having your team do a QPR class, either send us a DM or go through the link in our bio and we can set that up for you as long as it's before August 30th, because then after that, really excited, we're going to launch our mental health first aid for adults and youth. So with that being said, we have Sandra here with us today to talk with us about mental health. So I'm going to go ahead and bring her on. All right. Let's see. There we go. Hi. How are you?
Good. Excited.
Nervous, yeah, but excited.
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us here today, our first guest for the Minority Mental Health Speaker Series. I'm so excited. Thank you again so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start, for anyone watching in our audience, if you have any questions, feel free to go type them in the comment section. We'll answer them at the end. All right. So to begin, can you just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do? Let us get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Sandra Rodriguez. I'm 29. I am a recent graduate from CSUN. Sorry, I'm making sure that I'm looking at the camera. Okay, there we go. All right, awesome. Yeah, so, I'm a recent graduate from CSUN. I was a peer educator for Blues, great advocacy program dedicated to depression awareness, suicide prevention, just overall great program. I can't say enough good things about it. What I'm doing these days, just preparing for grad school or preparing to apply for grad school and just, taking it day by day.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you don't mind sharing with us, what is it that got you, interested in raising awareness and advocating for mental health?
Yeah, so definitely when it comes to mental health, it's kind of always been part of my life, my family, right? It's always been in the family. I guess now, right, as I've gotten older, I understand that it's what we know as intergenerational trauma, right? So, basically the experiences of my family members were passed on to me and I was directly affected by them. So between the ages of 12 and 15, I was trying to cope with these feelings. And so a lot of what I would engage in is a lot of self-destructive behaviors and just not really knowing how to cope, right? So when I was 15, I think things just came to a boil. So I'm an attempt survivor. Thankfully, everything was great. Everything, turned out okay. Thankfully, I was able to receive the help that I needed. Now I'm a mom of two. I went back to school and, here we are, right? I'm advocating for everybody else.
That's beautiful. Well, we're so happy that you're here, so brave, sharing your story, and, we appreciate you very much. So let's see. So I understand you're a leader in the Blues Project for CSUN, correct?
Yes, I was a peer educator. And like I said, can't say enough great things about the program. It was a great experience overall. My time as a lead, as a peer educator, was awesome. I think one of the things that we don't think about is that advocacy can feel very lonely at times, because you're speaking out about something, and, if it's very taboo or stigmatized, you kind of, it can be discouraging at times. But working with the Blues Project, there's so much strength in numbers. And so I met so many amazing people through there, determined people, passionate people, and it never felt, the load never felt as heavy as it did when I was working with the Blues. We all took it on together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really amazing thing.
Yeah.
So kind of, wrapping all of that together, was there like a specific moment in your life where you knew, like, you know what, I need to become an advocate for mental health, that like led you to wanting to be in the Blues Project?
Um, Definitely after my own experience, I kind of already made that decision of, like, after, receiving therapy and just kind of healing from everything else I was experiencing. It really inspired me to say, you know what, it's important for me to go ahead and, yes, of course, get my story out there, but help others find their voice as well. After I went back to school, that was probably that kind of like pinnacle moment. Like, yes, this is what I want to do. Being in psychology, it's very, in some ways, it's healing, right? Because you kind of learn about all the underlying things that cause mental illness, and it just kind of solidifies that it's not anybody's fault. It's just circumstantial at times. So
Absolutely.
that was definitely it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what about people who aren't, learning about psychology, don't major in psychology, but are going through things similar to you? What would you recommend for them to do to, seek help, or just, to, just what's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're
To
saying.
heal,
It's like,
to heal.
yeah, see, and that is one of the things. It's like, I acknowledge my privilege in receiving, education on that, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have known as much. Uh, so definitely for anybody that, doesn't have that privilege, right? I think that just solidifies the importance of everybody as a community to destigmatize, teach one another, help one another out, because these things, just as everything else has been passed down to us, right? All that intergenerational stuff, we can pass down intergenerational healing. We can pass that down to each generation and really teach one another. But I would say that maybe, if anybody is interested, just seeking community groups that are encouraging health education. So I know NAMI is a great one for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so you've mentioned intergenerational trauma a few times. Can you, if some people don't really understand what that is, do you mind just explaining that a little bit?
Yeah. So personally, what I define intergenerational trauma as would be definitely, the experiences of, previous generations. So maybe like your parents or your grandparents. We see this often in, like, in BIPOC, communities, right? So if like I said, for example, with my parents, they experienced a lot coming to the United States, or maybe dealing with their own issues, that gets passed down on to the next generation, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So, I think there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that people may not necessarily recognize exists.
Yes.
What was it, because I know each person's story is different. So if you don't mind sharing, like, what was it that made you recognize, like, oh my God, this is what's going on. I'm going to break it,
Yeah, they're definitely, seeing mental illness in my parents, seeing kind of substance abuse issues and alcoholism and all of that going on with them. It really made me kind of, I guess, recognize, like, wait a minute, why? Why do they do the things that they do? And, especially also with my brother. My brother was deported in June of 2010. And it was almost for similar things. He coped with his feelings in a way much different, and, eventually that led to his deportation. But, it just, I think it was all of those things that reminded me that, hey, you know what, I need to break the cycle. I need to break the cycle. I can't let this continue.
Mhm.
Um, so
Absolutely. Wow. That's, it's really brave. It's not an easy thing to do. So, so maybe what would you say for people who might be in similar situations where it's like, you mentioned earlier, it can be very lonely being an advocate and, raising
yeah.
awareness. How would you recommend people who are in similar situations to go about like, finding other people, or even just like if they are alone, how do you tackle something like that?
Yeah. See, for me, I guess my recommendation would be, don't be afraid to be the first person to speak out. Or if you are afraid, it's okay to be afraid, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But definitely try to push past that fear, um, and just speak out. Sometimes, at least from what I've learned, is that sometimes it's that first voice that kind of encourages others to say, you know what, I'm feeling the same way, or I'm seeing this happen, and how can I help? And making connections, that really helps, ease the loneliness.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did mention you're a mom of two. How has your story with mental illness, mental health, and just advocating, and then again tying it in with intergenerational trauma, how are
Yeah,
you like, working to pass that forward, not pass it forward, like break the cycle with your own community?
yeah, yeah. For definitely with them, I just kind of try my hardest, right, to of course take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one of the biggest things that I try to encourage with them, is to show them, hey, mom also is a person that deserves to take care of themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, it's okay for you to take care of yourself too. And if you need your space, then you can have your space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my son is 12 now. He's almost a teenager. And so I think just providing that support, reminding him, hey, you know what, if you're feeling anything, we're here. Um, and just things like that, right? Just kind of modeling, leading by example.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so great. So, I'm a huge advocate for the idea of like, what we teach each generation is what helps break the cycles.
Yes, yes.
So how would you say, like, how do you think the community would change if we started implementing actual like mental health education into our like, school systems, or even just like, in a general community setting?
Yeah, I think if we were to implement more of that, I really think we would see less of what we already see in our community.
Mm-hmm.
I would see probably less, oh my gosh, what is the word? I had the word at the top of my head right now. Um, we would just see less coping mechanisms, right? We would see people being able to speak what they're feeling and what they're going through, right? We wouldn't see people trying to silence their pain. I
Yeah.
think most importantly, and then I would also say that it would probably allow a lot of people that see this pain be able to know how to help. Because I think we can see it, right? We can see when somebody's going through something, but sometimes
Yeah.
we don't know, we don't think we'll have the right thing to say. And I think that could definitely help. Mental health education could definitely help that.
Absolutely. I really like what you said about silencing your pain. Can you talk a little bit more about like what you personally define that as?
I mean, I guess personally, I just kind of like coping
Mhm.
mechanisms, right? So people sometimes turn to alcohol, some people turn to substance abuse, or some people just don't deal with the pain at all, right? And maybe they
Yeah.
just kind of suppress it. And so I guess that's what I would define that as for sure.
Okay. Yeah. No, definitely agree. Um, so, if you don't mind sharing, what are some ways that you let your pain be vocalized, I guess is a way to say it. Instead of silencing it, how do you embrace it and, like, process it?
Yeah, so if I'm ever, experiencing something, a hardship of anything, I think accepting it. One of the things that we learned through blues was how to grieve, right? Allowing ourselves to grieve. And sometimes we think grieving is just a loss of a person, but sometimes it's a loss of a friendship, it's a loss of a relationship, it's loss of a job, and definitely I would say in this pandemic, we're experiencing a lot of grief.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I think allowing ourselves to grieve instead of being like, oh, you know what, it could always be worse. No, our pain is valid too, and we need to embrace that. So that would be one of the things I do. And then just, of course, lots of self-care. So much self-care. Self-care until you can't self-care anymore. Yeah.
Definitely. And so what are some of your examples of self-care?
One of the ones that I've kind of turned to as of lately is meditating.
Oh,
I
good.
love meditating. It's something so simple, right? Just remembering how to breathe. We think
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, everybody breathes, but no, it's just really remembering how to like really, yeah, calm down, I guess you could say, right? The other thing I do is, of course, spending time with my kids, and just whatever feels right. Exercising too. Endorphins. We need endorphins.
Yeah, definitely agree. So, ooh, we actually have a question. Let's see.
Ooh,
What would you say about people that are bipolar due to having to pretend to be something that they're not because society doesn't accept them?
yeah. Ooh, that's a hard one. I mean, definitely. Let me just go ahead and scroll up a little bit.
Hmm.
Okay, there we go. So I think, well, bipolar specifically, we know that uh, that's something that is really hard to already experience, and just acknowledging it, because since there's lots of highs, there's lots of lows. When you're feeling good, you're not going to think that you need anything. You're like, I'm fine, but when there's lows, that's kind of those moments where it's like, okay, maybe it is time to reach out. And as far as society, I think that goes back to the same thing. So many stigmas to be who you are. And I was actually talking with my friend Diana the other day, well, actually just a few hours ago, about being perfectly imperfect. And we are perfect just as we are. It
Yeah,
is, we are good, and we should just step into that and just accept ourselves,
yeah, definitely. I love
whether or
that.
not people accept us.
Perfectly imperfect. Or is
Perfect.
perfectly imperfect, right?
Yeah, perfectly perfect. I loved it. She did it. I was like, oh, I was like, that's it. I like this
That's
one. I'm
awesome.
taking this one.
Yes, I love that. Awesome. So okay, so because it is Minority Mental Health Month, let's kind of jump, into that.
Yeah,
Um, how have you experienced as a minority? Like, have you seen any sort of, stigmas or assumptions made because about your mental health because of who you are?
absolutely. The biggest one is "estás loca," right? That's the big one. Or nomás es los nervios, so it's just your nerves. Or just things to, I guess, kind of downplay the situation. And I know that it's not intentional to gaslight what somebody is feeling, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that those terms are really hurtful, and they don't really address the bigger issue, right?
Yeah,
And that causes people to have to silence what they're feeling, because they're like, oh, I'm going to be judged, or I'm going to feel rejected. And so, yeah, those would be two big ones for sure.
definitely.
Uh,
So in your family, your community, what are ways that you or someone who relates to you could go about breaking those stigmas and breaking those generational cycles of like these these sayings that don't necessarily help?
right. I guess I would just say to maybe, that's a tough one, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, it's just so common, but I would say maybe just look into the meaning a little bit more. It's like, yeah, you could just say that, but how is that really helping, right? And I think making the goal to help is probably a better goal than to judge. And
Yeah,
it's easier said than done. I can definitely say that. It is easier said than done. But we
absolutely.
should try it.
Yeah, definitely. I think some people resonated with those sayings we have, don't
Aww.
worry, just a stage, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah. So I mean, it's everywhere, and it's rough. But like you said, as long as we're doing our part, coming from a place where we don't judge, I think it's a
yeah.
good start. And then again, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and ask them in the little like question box thing. We'll get to it in a couple minutes. Okay, so going back to like the blues project, because I'm really fascinated with that. Like one of the best
They're
things
awesome.
that you've what is like one of the best things or most like profound things that you've gained or learned from it?
Oh man, what haven't I learned from them? I honestly, like, I'm still learning from them. I graduated right in May, but I'm still learning from them. Uh, since I entered school just a little bit later than everybody else, I feel so inspired by all of them. I hope they know that. I feel so inspired by all of them because they're younger and I feel like they're my baby siblings, and they're just doing so much for the community. Um, but I guess I would say that the biggest thing I learned from them is strength in numbers. You don't have to take on everything alone.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to take on the load by yourself. You can work as a team and collaborate and seek connectedness, right? Seek connections. And through that is how you get over hurdles better. Also, it taught me how to push past my anxiety a lot. I am okay with public speaking, but I'm actually really like anxious when it comes to it. And through doing presentations with them, I learned so much. I learned to like push past that and be like, no, we got to get the message out. And so
Yeah,
that was one too.
Yeah. Well, look, now here you are talking about mental illness, which is
I know. I'm on an IG live.
Live. Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome. Okay, so let's see. We have a couple questions. Oh, here we go. Yasmin asked, how does it feel to share all this?
It feels a little scary, but at the same time, it feels so liberating. It feels very liberating to just be able to just speak freely about this and to know that anybody that's listening that's maybe feeling those same things or maybe experience those same things, to know that, hey, you know what, you're not alone and this happens. It's sadly common, but, we are in the position now to be able to acknowledge it, recognize it, heal from it, and spread good from there,
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's see. Oop, sorry, I'm like trying to fix this.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so with that being said, like for someone who, may not have like anxiety, public speaking, just, having like sharing their voice, what advice would you give to like, overcome that?
Well, make the message matter more. I think zoom in, almost like laser focus on the message. The things that you want to speak out, the message you want to convey or send out to others, make that more important. Obviously, don't just deflect from what you're feeling. Acknowledge what you're feeling and kind of like question it, Say, you know what, is this really, there you go. I think I told myself before I started here, take the pressure off yourself. Take the pressure off yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be.
Yeah. Genuine, authentic, I think that's what resonates with people more. Let's see. We have, what resources would you recommend to learn more about minority mental health?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I really can't say that I know too many myself. I know that my friend Frida, I think she's watching right now, she was reading I'm Not Your Perfect Daughter. And she had a lot of great recommendations, a lot of great things to say about that book. I really, there are lots of Instagram pages. There's Therapy for Latinx. There's a few other ones, and I could definitely put them in like the comments later on after this is over. But just kind of like-minded collective groups. Instagram has been a really great source. We see a lot of NFTs, a lot of social workers on here, and they create their own pages and they send out such great information. And of course, NAMI is also great too, and Blues Project.
Definitely, yeah. And I think she said, I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica.
There you go.
There it is.
She got it right.
And then, okay, so there's another question. How would you differentiate a stigma from expecting to overachieve by your parents, peers, or other peer pressure?
Yeah, so stigmas. Um, well, just expectations. I think expectations, that's just more cultural.
Mm-hmm.
I would define expectations as more cultural. Now stigmas though, I think stigmas are just what you're experiencing as a person, right? That I would consider more of a stigma. If you're not allowed to feel sad, if you're not allowed to feel pressure, right? You feel the negative effects from that pressure, I think that is probably more stigmatized than, the expectation itself. I think they're both very intertwined, though. I think, when you're being expected to be this perfect person or to, like, let's say for me, I'm the first to go to school in my family, I'm expected to do all these great things after that. And sometimes that's not, I wouldn't say it's not realistic. You should definitely shoot for the stars and beyond. But I think it's okay to feel that pressure and to take breaks sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. Breaks are super
Yeah.
important. Huge advocate for breaks.
Yes, breaks. Take all the breaks you need. I'm taking a break right now. I was supposed to apply to grad school right after graduating, and I was so dead set on it. And then I finally kind of stopped and I'm like, why? Why am I kind of stressing myself out over this? I can
Yeah.
just take a break and it'll be okay. It'll still be
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
exactly. It'll still be there. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Let's see. And that kind of ties in with this comment here saying, I've always been looked at to be a genius and a perfect person by my parents, and it really drove me crazy. And that kind of ties in with what we were saying about, like, the stigma and expectations.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, and I definitely have to emphasize, take that pressure off yourself.
Yeah.
Others can have so many expectations for you, but at the end of the day, it is what makes you happy. And boundary setting, I think, is one of the hardest, but probably one of the most important
Mm-hmm.
to establish with people, with your family members, to say, yeah, you know what, I know you have these big dreams for me, but I need to do what feels right for me. And if I don't do what feels right for me, then nobody's going to be happy, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. And then let's see. I think we have one more question. How do you stay motivated to advocate for mental health in our community?
I think it's something that a lot of other mental health advocates have mentioned, self-care. I think in taking breaks, allowing yourself to take breaks. So specifically with everything that's going on right now,
Mm-hmm.
with the Black community being affected so heavily, and we have to fight for them and speak out for them. It does get tiring, or at least emotionally draining, to hear so much negativity from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, there you go. What came to mind is Dr. Abram Milton. He was on another talk with NAMI
Mm-hmm.
recently. Let's see if I get it right. Okay, so withdrawing, just kind of withdrawing, never retreating, but just withdrawing, taking in, what you're feeling, and then going back when you're ready.
Yeah,
So I think, and the same thing with mental health advocacy, taking those breaks, taking care of yourself first, and then going back to advocacy, taking it one
absolutely.
step at a time.
Yes, 100% agree. I think it's so important to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Yes.
Awesome. Let's see, we go a couple more comments. So Frida says it's emphasized on depression. I'm assuming the book. You can always count on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the crisis text line
Yes.
as well. We know a few people that from Blues that volunteer for them, and they're also really great.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, those are always available. You brought up so many great points. Thank you. Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
All right. Is there anything else you want to share? Just, highlight, really emphasize for the community.
Yeah, so let's see. I actually had it right here. I had little notes, by the way. I was like,
Oh,
okay, I need to I need to know what I'm gonna say. But
yeah.
okay, you know what? The one that comes to mind that helps me a lot is about, it's an analogy to the moon. So for the moon, right, goes through many phases, right? Sometimes it's very small, sometimes it's big and bright, but it's still beautiful
Mhm.
regardless. And I think as long as we embrace ourselves in all phases of our life, right? Even when we're down, when we're happy, you know, when we're struggling, um, it just, it's important to embrace ourselves in all those phases, the big ones, the small ones, because we're amazing either way.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great analogy. I'm gonna start using that.
Yes, yes.
That's beautiful. All right. Let's see. We just have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up here. What advice would you give for people that don't usually talk about these things and kind of keep it to themselves? What advice would you give for self-care because they're not ready to reach out?
Yeah, and I think that is such an important thing to say, because sometimes you're not ready. Like, you know, yeah, I could be here telling anybody all day, like, yes, just speak up, don't be afraid. But, you know, if you don't feel ready, if you kind of still have that internal struggle, for sure, take care of that first, you know, and take care of yourself first. And don't be afraid to reach out. You know, there are people that care about you. There are people that are there for support. You know, like there's crisis text lines, there's, you know, numbers, there's NAMI, and NAMI has great, you know, QPR sessions as well. But I think definitely just self-awareness. Self-awareness is definitely a thing. Acknowledge what you're feeling and go from there, you know, acknowledge what you're feeling and take care of that first.
Absolutely.
And we're here when you're ready.
Yeah. Take your time.
Yes.
And then he said, Man says, this is my first time talking about bipolarism. That's exactly why we have these conversations, because it opens up the floor for people who may not have, you know, the courage or, you know, the ability or the platform to say these things, to share. So with that being said, thank you so much for coming on here. So brave, so courageous, so beautiful. We really love everything you had to say. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I really loved everything that you had to say.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody in the comments. Like, oh my gosh, the love and everything. I appreciate you all.
Thank you all for watching. All right, stay tuned for more series coming soon. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.